Good morning. I will now call this work session for October 10th, 2023 to order, and we'll start by reading our Who Are We statement. We are the Polk County Leadership Governance Team. If we could pick one phrase to define us, it would be student-centered, because when we come together to work, we lean on our diverse backgrounds and experiences to ensure that our decisions are focused on providing a high-quality education for all students. The four most important things to our governance team are operating with integrity, respecting our students, staff, families, and each other, establishing a culture where our stakeholders feel valued, supported, and have opportunities for personal and professional growth, and supporting an approach of continuous improvement to ensure student outcomes. Collectively, we need to work on behalf of the children we serve and find avenues of agreement so that we can govern the district in an effective manner. There is no acceptable alternative. We will always collaborate in a respectful manner in order to enhance opportunities for each student and staff member. We will not disparage others. Our students will thrive because we will remain committed to supporting the whole child. We hope to engage and empower our students and stakeholders to create a community of lifelong learners. And with that, I'll turn it over to Superintendent Hyde.
Good morning, Madam Chair, members of the board, members of staff, and community. Thank you for being here this morning. We are going to kick off this morning, as we do every workshop, by visiting with two of our community-based partners, and the first up is Heartland for Children. So if we could invite them up to the microphone. And just so you know, on the way in from work to work today, I heard your commercial on the radio on 102.5, so great job.
Great. Well, thank you for having me. I am Tracy Gray. I'm the Chief Community Relations Officer with Heartland for Children. And as you can see, I've got a PowerPoint that was shared. So Heartland for Children, we've been around since 2004. We are the lead community-based care agency serving Polk, Highlands, and Hardee counties, and we are responsible for the entire foster care system. I've been at Heartland ever since we started, since 2004, so it's been a privilege to work for the agency. You can see right here that everything that we're responsible for, protective services, that is all of the case management services. So for any child that is removed from their home due to abuse and neglect by the Department of Children and Families, those cases come over to us for ongoing case management services. We're responsible for foster care, adoption, independent living, child abuse prevention, family preservation, family support services, and other related services. So I want to give you a little bit of data on what is going on in our community. So back in fiscal year 22-23, there were over 1,200 children removed from our community for abuse and neglect. Way too many kids. As of July 2023, there are over 2,000 children with open child welfare dependency cases in our community. And as I'm talking today, and I'm going to get into about the partnerships that we have with Polk County Public Schools, this data matters because these are students that are attending Polk County schools. Of those 2,076 children, 345 children were placed and are placed in foster homes. The remainder of those children, 783, are placed with relatives and non-relatives. And we really rely on relatives and non-relatives to step up and take care of children because foster care is not a place for them to be. Currently, we have 182 foster homes, and that is not enough. That is a significant decrease since COVID. We were sitting at about 250. So our efforts and part of our collaboration with the Polk County Public Schools, you'll hear shortly, will be around foster parent recruitment. And our goal is to be up to about 250 foster homes. You can see over to the right some data on some of the top child abuse maltreatments that our students in the Polk County schools suffer from. Top 5 for the year 2022-23. These typically are the top 5 from year after year. If you take a look at drug abuse by the parent is a #1 concern and reason for children being removed in our community. There were over 26% of those types of cases. So these are children that are right there in the middle of the household. There's a lot of drugs that are open. You got people coming in and out of the home, and the safety of the child is at risk. Domestic violence, you were looking at 14%. Typically, the drug abuse and domestic violence many times will go together hand in hand, but not all the time. And then the third highest reason is your inadequate supervision. That can also go along with the drug abuse. So you might have one maltreatment and then a second maltreatment that is matched together for one child.
It's easy to miss.
Let me bridge into this video. This is a 30-second video. This is just one of our foundational videos that we show. And so I just want to kind of...
It's easy to miss when a child is hurting, when abuse happens in dark corners, when the support from a parent is absent. But when a child is embraced by a family, when hurt turns to hope, when they're nurtured and praised for the amazing things they do, then something remarkable happens. They get to be a kid. Heartland for Children. Give hope. Support families.
So this is one of our foundational videos, and I'm going to talk here shortly about some of the videos that we are going to be doing with 3 to 5 Polk County Public School employees who are also foster parents, and we're really excited about that. So here are the ways that we partner with the Polk County Public Schools. The first is our educational specialist, which is Cherie Perrin, sitting right here with me. The second is the Community Partnership School over there at Crystal Lake Elementary. This is the first and only Community Partnership School in Polk County. The third way we partner is now our most recent collaborative partnership is around the recruitment for foster families. So I want to talk first about our collaboration with our education specialist. So the role of our education specialist is to bridge the gap between those children being served by child welfare and also attending Polk County Public Schools. She attends meetings, school-based meetings, with leadership teams with the school system, and ensures that all of the educational needs of that child are met. If you think about children that are removed from their homes, many times they are placed outside of their school of origin. So there's a lot of work that goes behind the scenes, and typically children that are removed will create delays in their educational learning. So during these staffings and the meetings, and you can see down the Every Student Succeeds Act, ESSA, I'm sure you've heard a lot about that. We have a small nugget, small responsibility for that. So anytime that a child changes placement in the foster care system, changes a placement, and that can happen often, we have to pull together an ESSA staffing that Cherie will facilitate to determine if it's in the best interest of that child to remain in the school of origin, or if not, then pull the folks together to talk about the school that the child needs to go to with wraparound supports. The schools are invited to attend those meetings as well, guardian ad litems, the case managers, anybody that's involved with that child. I also want to thank, I know that Lisa Miller and Cherie met at a meeting, so I want to thank Lisa Miller for really stepping up. I know we have an upcoming meeting to talk about anything that you can do. I appreciate your advocacy around children with special needs, and so we've got an upcoming meeting to talk about maybe some opportunities with that. The second partnership is around the Community Partnership School. This is at Crystal Lake Elementary. I won't go through all of this, but you can see who our core partners are. We were recently certified as a Community Partnership School, and we're very proud of that. It takes all of the core partners. We are under a 25-year commitment with each other, and we've got a director that is placed at Crystal Lake Elementary that oversees all of the social services that we have dumped in to that school. You can see that we first launched at Crystal Lake Elementary in 2018, and we're very excited that we were finally certified as a community partnership school by UCF who's the Center for Community Partnership School back in October of 2022. We were a year ahead of getting that school certified. You can also see here some of the outcomes for the different social services that we plugged in. I'm not going to go through those for the sake of time. The third and most recent collaborative partnership with Polk County Public Schools, I want to thank Superintendent Hyde for meeting with me a couple of months ago. And when I came to him and we sat face to face, he was all on board about recruiting foster families through the school system. It's one of the largest employers in Polk County. People that are already, whether they're instructional staff or non-instructional staff, these are people that we want to target for recruitment. So here are some things that we agreed to. I will be speaking at one of the principal meetings. We don't have that set up yet, but that's one thing that we agreed to. The superintendent already wrote a letter and sent it out to all of the principals. And you can see on the next slide the poster that we have developed to hang up in every school, every teacher's lounge, with a QR code. We're going to put something on the school's website, or excuse me, the Polk County Public Schools main website, and then we will also target other schools to help recruit foster families through their network. We're going to get into the community newsletter that's already developed and out in circulation. And the biggest thing is we're going to share stories of your employees that are already foster parents and have a great story to share. Here's the poster that we developed and was sent out to all of the schools, I believe, just kind of last week. And I want to close with a video. I know my time's up, but we got 5 minutes for questions, so I'm going to roll over a little bit. This is a 30-second video. The young adult in this video came into foster care at age 9. He attended Winter Haven High School. He is a successful adult now, and it was because he had a caring foster parent during his years in foster care. He was in foster care almost his whole life.
Because you fostered, I've learned how to reel in a fish. Because you fostered, I went hunting for the first time. Because you fostered, I had a family to celebrate birthdays, Christmas, and Thanksgivings with. Because you fostered, I became the man I am today.
And because he had that caring foster parent, he's successful. He's a mentor now. He's a basketball coach. He gives back to other children in our community. And these are types of caregivers that we are going to be looking for in the school system. Thank you. And any questions?
Ms. Miller?
I just want to say thank you and appreciate what you're doing with Heartland, and I'm excited to come and meet. I think if we can do anything to build the support for the students who need academic and behavior supports, if they have to switch schools, I think that's been our biggest challenge, to make sure the supports are following them. So I look forward to that meeting. And even at one point years ago, I would go in and talk to the foster families about, because they would be a little cautious of taking a child who might need an IEP support or 504 support. So I think we can help connect staff to maybe do some kind of regular trainings with Heartland for the foster families, that would give them another sense of relief that they won't have to face that alone. So thank you so much for what you do.
Thank you, Lisa.
Ms. Wyatt?
Thank you. Good morning.
Good morning.
Thank you all for all that you do. I just had a couple questions. For the number of foster families that you have, are those fully taking long-term, or are those including the respite foster as well?
Those are for long-term.
Okay. And then the other question would be, is there more that the district can do to support when a foster child is placed in a new home, getting those services, busing services, uniforms, whatever it is, transitioned? I know Superintendent Hyde and I had a conversation about this recently, but with our homeless students, we have a point person on our staff. Is that something that you guys have someone, or is that something that?
Well, so Cherie is our person, and that's a great question, because when it comes to busing and transportation, that is a challenge sometimes to get that set up. I just had Cherie email the director that's over that to set a meeting with myself to just talk about some of those challenges and bust down some barriers to ensure that transportation is put into place for these children.
And then my last question, just on the transportation topic, I know you mentioned when they go into foster homes, a lot of times it's in a different school zone. Are we doing everything we can to ensure that they can stay at their home school and where they've been attending school and they're comfortable, or are we automatically?
There's opportunities there, and that's what we're going to be talking about in our upcoming meeting. But I think also, too, when there's challenges with workforce, bus drivers, different things like that. There's also challenges when we try to set up bus transportation where that child may be spending too long on a bus. And so that may be reasons why we don't keep that child. If that child's on a bus for 3 hours total for the day to and from school, then the team that is on the staffing may decide that it's not in the best interest. So there are opportunities, and I look forward to talking with the director over the transportation. And so, any help or anybody that wants to be involved in that conversation is certainly invited.
Is there a certain age that we start including the students in those conversations as far as?
Yeah, absolutely. We always want to include students in the conversation when they have the ability, to participate in those conversations. Many times there are reasons why we don't, but there are also probably more reasons why we do.
Awesome, thank you.
Thank you.
So if I could add to that, Denise Santos is actually our contact for this.
Okay,
However, I've been talking with her and Ms. Williams about the possibility, given a number of case numbers or caseload that exists across Polk County, and it's a growing number, about the possibility of providing a support staff position in that department to more adequately address these issues. I do want to address the transportation issue. All of those students are protected under McKinney-Vento,
great.
which means that if the parent or the child's parents or the guardian indicates that they want their child to stay at their traditionally zoned school, they must be allowed to stay there. In fact, McKinney-Vento crosses county lines as well. So if a student somehow ends up in foster care, it's a Polk County student, and they end up in Hillsborough County, the requirement would be that Hillsborough is required to bus that student to the county line, and then we would be required to pick up that student and transport him or her back to their normal school. What you find, as was stated, it's regardless of workforce development, is that the reality of it is that the transportation time, it's not that transportation is lacking. It is that the timeline to move those students using magnet hub transportation routes and other things, we do very little private transportation for a number of reasons in Florida, but that can become the barrier. So the student or the caregiver or the case manager may ultimately make the recommendation for them to move closer to where they're currently residing, rather than that student be on the bus for an extended period of time. And so those are some of the issues that we run into. That's not a failure or a lack of effort on behalf of the busing department. It is just simply the reality of where that student is physically located versus where they'd like to attend. And then, as you know, we don't have the exact same career or workforce programs or academy programs at all of our schools. And so a student may have been participating in one and now chooses, or by virtue of being in this situation, finds that it's no longer accessible to them. And so we try to the best extent possible to maintain that continuity with the program. But again, there are other issues that arise, especially if students choose to work after school, other opportunities, other interests, and that can become the conflict that we ultimately end up dealing with. So I just wanted to make sure we provide that clarification. But we are currently reviewing Ms. Santos' department to make a determination as to whether or not a specialist or an additional coordinator in that department specifically for this and McKinney-Vento students would make more sense.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
And we have a great relationship with Denise Santos. There's a lot of collaboration that goes on there as well.
Ms. Fields?
Good morning. I just wanted to commend you and your team for the work that you do in the community. And I really wanted to do a shout out to Ms. Markinia Butts Fisher. She is a blessing, and whenever I'm needing information about anything related to helping families, she's Johnny on the spot. And I didn't realize until I got an opportunity to have more conversation with her, all the benefits that foster children have beyond high school, being able to have their education paid for, all that stuff. didn't realize that. So I guess one of the questions that I have is how do you all ensure that when children are of age that they are made aware of the benefits of continuing beyond high school and being able to go to college or wherever they choose to go and the expense being paid?
Great question. You know, years ago, there was new statute allowing for children that once they turn 18, that they can have a choice to stay in extended foster care. It's amazing how many of these children do not have a support system once they turn 18 and they age out in foster care. So they have case managers. Once they turn a certain age in foster care, they actually have an assigned independent living coach. That assigned independent living coach who works with Marquina ensures that that child knows of all the benefits available to them so that child can make an informed decision on whether or not they want to be in extended foster care or the independent living program. So it's a very tight-knit group, and it's a group of children that turn into young adults that we are very focused on.
You guys are doing a great job.
Thank you.
Ms. Miller?
That brought up one other question that I have about when they age out, because we talk about outcomes and not just getting them to graduation, but making sure they're independent living and gainfully employed. Years ago, I was invited, they would have home, almost like gatherings where you could invite friends over, and they would do almost like a housewarming where they would get things that the student would, or the young adult would need as they move out. Do they still do that? And how do you provide that after graduation care?
Yeah, so after graduation, and really we talk about post-18, right?
Right.
We really rely on, of course, there's some state funding that comes in to help support those young adults as they're transitioning into adulthood. We also have a recent grant with the Church of Latter-day Saints that have really kind of wrapped their arms around this post-18 population. And as they're transitioning into housing, we've got to teach them to learn to live on their own. And so through the Church of Latter-day Saints, they're also providing kind of starter kits to, purchase different items to get them set up in an apartment, in a house, with a roommate. But we've got different care lords that serve that population.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Thank you very much. There are no further questions.
Thank you.
Next up, we'll invite Michelle Turnage, Developmental Director for School Engagement from the American Heart Association, to join us. Wendy, can you take this?
Good morning. My name is Michelle Turnage. I am the School Engagement Director. I partner with schools here in Polk County Public Schools, and I work with 6 other counties. I extend all the way down to Stewart or through Martin County, and I dabble a little bit into Okeechobee, the county, as the city of Okeechobee is a little bit bigger than that. I have the pleasure of working with your schools and have the last 3 years. I'm excited to be here to share sort of the outcomes of this past year and kind of where we're moving forward and what we're doing and accomplishing in your schools. So this is actually what you see the picture here. This is a little boy. His name is Phil, and that's his mother. There's a video that I'm happy to share with you guys later. It's a little bit longer, and for sending purposes, it's a little bit more difficult to send a PowerPoint with it included. But Phil is actually a student up in Virginia, and not often do we get to hear stories of how what our students are learning in the schools actually take that home and use it and learn it with their families. And so Phil was in kindergarten last year. And he participated in our program, Kids Heart Challenge. That's our elementary program at his school. And he was super excited, and he wanted to complete something called Finn's Mission, which is a part of our program that students participate in. And he and his mother learned hands-only CPR together. A week later, literally a week later, they were in church together. This is actually the church they were in. And a gentleman collapsed, and he and his family were able to implement hands-only CPR and help save that life. I share that story because many people often think kindergartners, they're so young, they're not learning, not that they're not learning, but they're oftentimes not able to understand those things. But he was able to walk his mom through hands-only CPR. He counted out the compressions for her, and that gentleman gentleman's life was saved. So this is what our students here in Polk County are learning when they participate in our program with their families. So we're creating essentially generations of lifesavers as they, continue to grow. The need is still there, obviously, to teach more individuals. Something I'm super proud of, we really pushed our initiative of hands-only CPR last year, especially after COVID and the things that went on during that time frame and social distancing and such. And so throughout the schools that participated, we had 241 students plus their families that learned hands-only CPR together. That's in addition to the high schools where they're already learning hands-only CPR in 9th and 11th grade. So these are mainly actually just elementary students. So they're being exposed to this hands-only CPR prior to entering, middle school and high school, which is pretty cool. This is something where I'm really excited about this year is I'm really looking to honor our local heart heroes, as we call them. So these are students in our community here that have been impacted by a congenital heart defect. They self-identify through our programs, and they can select whether they wish to be recognized or not. This is a student, she's actually at Loftman Oaks. I spoke with her mom recently. She's in 3rd grade. She was born with a congenital heart defect, and she had to have surgery at just 5 months old. But she is a champion, and her family are a champion for heart health. And one of the exciting things about recognizing them is it gives students, especially in elementary school, an opportunity to understand that heart disease isn't just for old people. That's oftentimes what I hear. It's for old people, things like that, that it does impact, some of their peers. So if they are able to financially contribute to the Heart Association, the donations that they provide to us, we are able to do more research to help students just like her. And we actually identified another one too. So this is Andreana, same school at Loftman Oaks. Super kind. They applied for actually our National Heart Ambassador program. So that's how we were able to get connected. And so that's something, again, as Loftman Oaks completes their program this fall, we do it in November, they are the local champions at their school that we get to recognize, which is really sweet. So last year, we had 23 schools participate in our program, and I'll go through some of that data in just a minute. But out of those 23 schools, 43 students and their families identified that they had been impacted by a congenital heart defect. That's just at 23 schools. So imagine the number of schools you have here in the county, how many other students there are that we haven't quite identified yet, or that would like to be recognized. So as we expand into the elementary, middle, and high programs even more, we're hopefully going to be able to identify those children or their siblings and families that like to be recognized, and they do a lot of great things for us. They make videos for us that say thank you. It helps, again, connect all of the students within the county to other students that have been impacted. So these are our highlights from last year. These are pictures of actually our schools here. I was able to be in and out and about them this year, which is really fun. Over 15,000, almost 16,000 families received heart healthy information, so the heart attack and stroke warning signs, hands-only CPR, the dangers of vaping. 23 schools participated, almost 2,000 students took a heart healthy pledge. 43 families, as I mentioned, identified or self-identified as being impacted by heart disease or stroke. 241 students and their families learned hands-only CPR, the dangers of vaping, and the warning signs of a stroke. We were able to give back over $6,000 to your schools so that they can continue to support their PE programs or other initiatives within their school that are health and wellness related. And approximately $93,000 was raised to kind of continue to fuel our mission so that we can also continue to give back to our schools. The top impact schools this year, they always love to be recognized. At the top, no surprise there, Miss Nelson at Chain of Lakes. I hear she's highly competitive, so that was her goal this year. Collectively, led by her PE teachers, raised over $8,000. Code Academy, just over $6,800. Mrs. Farron's actually was slimed this year, so I have some pictures you guys can see. She participated in that and, engaging her students, and I hope she doesn't mind, that I'm sharing this, but when we were there at her sliming event, her son actually has been impacted by a congenital heart defect when he was younger. So our cause is important to him, and so that's, why she continues to support us. And then down the street, Bartow Elementary Academy, this was their first year participating, and they did a phenomenal job with their program and engaging their students. So on the left, you can see our committed partners. This list has actually grown, so we are now at 35 schools. So there's been a few that have been added since I was able to send this over. A lot of these that we say we are finalizing details with, some of them have actually been moved over to the list of committed partners, and I have some others that we are working on finalizing some details to bring their program to the schools. We'll move through those for sake of time. So something I love to do, we have a district dashboard, as we call it. This is an overview of the state and where each district sits within, relation as far as donations. And a lot of our districts are competitive with each other, so I like to share this. You all are right at number 12, which is phenomenal. And I know you guys are very similar in size to some of the ones at the top. So my goal is to kind of get you guys up to the top and spotlight you all there as well. You have incredible schools and families here. And so I just love to be able to recognize you and put you, in the right place with your peers that are of similar size. So just wanted to thank you again for your support. Some of the things that I didn't have here, I know I shared a lot of it last year. We have a ton of free resources available for the schools that are provided at no cost, part of our program. It's optional. Something I wanted to highlight, which I found was important at another school district I was meeting with, particularly for middle and high school programs, is we do have a text to quit line for schools and students who are looking to stop vaping or smoking, I guess is the right way to say it. So that's something I'm going to be reaching out and sharing with our middle schools and high schools as a free resource. It's completely confidential. It's supported by us and another organization, but it's just meant to be there for students so that they can, if they want to stop vaping or smoking, they have those resources. So we have anti-vaping resources, heart health resources, STEM, resources for our classroom teachers, a lot of fun things that schools are able to use in addition to some of the things we have within our program. Any questions that I can answer?
Mr. Sharpless?
First, I want to give a big shout out to Principal Nelson at Chain Lakes Elementary. It's one of my schools, and the fact that she's the top impact school. So if you're listening, Principal Nelson, congratulations. Keep up the hard work. I also want to thank you for what you guys do. And I did want to ask Superintendent Hyde, with the Juul settlement and the funds we have there, are we partnering with the American Heart Association to do any of those use those funds in any of that way, or no?
Not at this time.
Okay.
As I've shared, those funds, and Mr. Bridges announced at the last workshop, if you recall, that there's an update that will actually benefit Polk County. We will receive additional revenue above and beyond the initial $2 million that we were awarded, and those dollars will go to address the installation of vape detection devices in our restrooms and address some educational needs. So it's not that, American Heart Association could not be a party to that. And part of our efforts in the education focus in our health classes and our initiatives there, but the focus right now is to put those anti-vape detection devices in our middle school and high school restrooms and other areas as quickly as possible. But Mr. Bridges, again, and he'll be with us in November, so he will be able to provide an update. I don't have that data yet, so.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for what you do.
Thank you.
Mr. Nolte?
Thank you for your hard work. When I was teaching physical education for many, many years, we always look forward to Jump Rope for Heart.
Yes.
I was 9 years over here and 26 over in Hillsborough, and the kids just absolutely loved it. Now, is that still pretty popular?
Yes, so our Kids Heart Challenge program is actually what is formerly known as Jump Rope for Heart. About 5 years ago, we expanded our program based on feedback. So we heard a lot of feedback from educators and families. Our kids don't know how to jump rope, especially at the younger age. And I'm like, well, they're learning. But also expanding to Kids Heart Challenge broadened it out so that we could bring in more opportunities to add in health education as a whole. So not just physical activity, but obviously continuing to share the harmful effects of vaping and smoking and those kinds of things. So thank you for what you did. Our program, and with Jump Rope for Heart and Kids Heart Challenge, I believe it's 46 years old now. So we've been around a long time. The American Heart Association also turns 100 next July. So we've been around for 100 years, and we can't do without awesome support like you all.
Thank you.
Yes,
Keep up the
thank
good
you.
work.
Ms. Fields?
Superintendent Hyde, this might be a question for you, but I'm very much interested in the vaping training courses, and we've talked about that before. Do you have any ideas of how many of our schools are actually benefiting from that, if any? I don't know.
All of our schools presently have a unit of instruction on vaping and anti-tobacco. So that starts as early as elementary school and goes all the way up through high school. That's part of their health and physical education instruction unit. However, our intention, again, using some of these funds is to bring in guest speakers, make sure that we're marketing and advertising properly to our students through posters, social media, those types of opportunities. But again, more importantly, putting those detection devices so that we're notified if a student's using them in a restroom, we can respond quickly to help address those. Again, one of the added benefits of the random searches thus far has been we are noticing more and more or fewer vapes on our campuses on those dates and times because students know it's going to trigger the alarm as they walk through those detectors. And so we're trying to take as many positive steps as we can because disciplinary action alone is not going to address this, right? We're not going to punitively punish students and change their behavior necessarily, whereas we want to focus heavily as well on the education side. Why is it bad? What are the concerns? What are the long-term effects? And that's where I think the guest speakers coming in and doing those in small groups, I think is far more impactful. So, doing large assemblies is not going to be our approach. We would do them through classrooms, combining multiple classrooms, but again, that way it's far more personal and interactive for our students, and there's plenty of opportunities for us to explore. That's why I said, they very well may have to be one of our partners in order for us to cover the entirety of the school district. So I'll be happy to provide the board an update. I just want to make sure Mr. Bridges gets the first opportunity to update the board on that settlement agreement.
I understand, but I'm happy that we're all on the same page. My question to you is, first of all, thank you all for your work, and it's very important and very serious work. Are you available to do vaping training in communities like nonprofits like Girls Inc.?
Sometimes it depends, so I say that because I'm not a doctor, so that's like my asterisk. But I can certainly provide, some materials that students can use and groups can use. I always like there to be like a subject matter expert because students like to get technical sometimes and families. But if I can't do it for any reason, we have lots of community partners that we actually do work with within the hospital systems. So I'm happy to reach out to our peers and see if there's a better fit for that could actually like directly answer those questions in a way that students, can get not that I won't give the right information, I just want to make sure if they're taking that information home, it is correct for any reason. But I am happy to share all of our resources with all of the schools and even our community partners within the district if they need, information or want access to those resources. I'm happy to share that.
Well, that's good to know.
Yeah, of course.
There are no further questions. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you so much for your time.
Apologize. Madam Chair, the next item, I'd like to bring Nicole Bennett, Senior Director, up from the Divisions of Schools and Transformation Office. At this time, she's going to provide a brief summary of school improvement plans. Those school improvement plans, just so you're aware, we have modified some of how we post this information. Ms. Fields asked if we could provide that to you for your respective schools on a flash drive, so I'll be following up to make sure we can do that. So if any others of you would like information shared with you in that same capacity, please let us know. But everything is right now available via a link. And so just also to update you, if you recall, we initiated academic improvement plans, or academy improvement plans, I should say, for our high school programs. Those will be ready at the end of the first 9 weeks, and they will be provided to you as well. And I'd be happy to make sure that you get them not only for the entirety of the district, so you can see comparative data, but you can we'll also filter it so it's specific to your schools, and you can filter that. And it functions very much like the school improvement plan, where they look at their historical data and then they establish goals for growth, increasing diversity, student success, beneficial outcomes, maintaining students within the program, completion rates, all of that's included in that academy improvement plan. So I'll be happy to share that with you at the end of the first 9-week period. Ms. Bennett.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
I have the pleasure of speaking about our school improvement plans, or SIP plans, for you all to review before they would need to be approved and made open to the public. So for our school improvement plans, and I gave each of you a folder, and within that folder, it does give you very specific directions on how to access the school improvement plans. And also, I also included another sheet for you, because as I talk about ATS&I, TS&I, and CS&I, I'm sure you're like, what are all those letters represent? So I gave you that document as well for you to reference within there. All of our schools have to complete a school improvement plan. That's both public and charter. And schools do fall under ATS&I, TS&I, and CS&I, as indicated by their ESSA components. Updates for the school improvement plan this year, nothing major, but it does have schools now intentionally focus more on those ESSA subgroups. If you are falling below 41% in a subgroup consistently, either 3 years or 6 years, then you do have to identify a strategy in order to support those specific subgroups that have not been above that 41% each year. So that is really one of the major updates within the school improvement plan. This is the document that I have provided you that just show the category that is specified under ATS&I, TS&I, and CS&I, and the different criteria that relates to each category. You can see ATS&I schools, they're not identified as CS&I, but they have one or more subgroup below that 41%. Our TS&I schools, they're also not identified as CS&I, but they have at least one consistently underperforming subgroup below 32% for 3 consecutive years. And then for our CS&I schools, these can be identified in the following ways. They're our lowest performing. They could be a D or an F school. They have a federal index below 41. Also a school that has a grad rate below 67%. And also that federal index below 41% in the same subgroups for 6 consecutive years. So that's a lot of years where those subgroups are not performing to where they need to be performing. Just some district and school requirements. You will notice also under those different ATS&I, TS&I, and CS&I. CS&I schools are the only schools where the school improvement plan has to be submitted to the state for approval. Our ATS&I and TS&I, those are submitted to the district for district review and for those specific school improvement plans to be approved. All school improvement plans were submitted by the deadline of August 30th. That's when they all had to be reviewed and submitted. And then those plans that fell under CS&I were submitted to the state. And then as we speak, there's still revisions and feedback being provided for schools before the final deadline of October 30th. November 1st would be the date that all school improvement plans would be made available to the public for review. Okay? This slide just indicates just some due dates for the school improvement plan. Again, I have also emailed this information to your school board secretary, provided you with a hard copy for you to be able to access the school improvement plans with your usernames and your passwords. So those are available for you. Again, August 30th is when we submitted them to the district and to the state. By October 31st, we would need school board approval for publication, and then November 1st, SIP plans are published for the public to review in SIMS.
So just a couple other quick points to highlight here. For existing board members, you're very familiar with school improvement plans. For new board members or newer board members, wanted to make sure you got a little bit more background and that we clarified for you the acronyms, and you did a fantastic job. Thank you very much. But I cannot emphasize enough the importance of a school improvement plan. It is not a compliance document. And many times districts and schools will treat it as such. It's something that's due to the state. You know, we bring it before the board. but school improvement plans are continuously monitored. They are not plans that lie outside of other initiatives that are being implemented at a school. The school improvement plan, if done correctly, and when done correctly, informs daily practice and informs the school district, more importantly, as to what specific resources are required to best support that school and its students' needs. Every school is different. Every school is unique. You could take 6 schools that have the same exact demographic enrollment, same Title I population, same other issues, and you will find that all of those schools vary in their needs. Why? Students come to school at various stages of readiness, and with different needs. And so each school, while generically there are going to be supports that we know we're going to have to offer those schools, we do rely upon the school improvement plan committee. This is not done in isolation in a principal's office or an assistant principal's office. As was mentioned, there's a lot of oversight that goes into these. There's a lot of feedback and review that goes on during this time to make sure that the outcomes are measurable, that they're focused and intentional, and that we as a school district understand what the school requires of us. So that, again, we're not taking them away from their school improvement plan. We're supporting and reinforcing the school improvement plan by virtue of what resources and supports we can provide. And this is also the document by which we will measure and gauge progress throughout the year. Much like students now take 3 assessments throughout the year so we can measure their performance growth, we now meet with these schools consistently throughout the year to ensure that they're on a positive trajectory after each student assessment and even in between, because other goals, for example, might be improving student attendance. Not necessarily measured by the state accountability system, but as we pointed out, chronic absenteeism absolutely has an adverse effect on our overall performance scores. So attendance, school culture, climate, parent communication, parent engagement are other goals, discipline, are other goals that are included within the school improvement plan, quote-unquote non-academic goals, but as we all know, have a direct impact on academics and a school's ability to be successful. So those are all monitored as well. And any area where we start to see some decline or some concerns throughout the year, then again, additional resources, additional reinforcements are provided so that that school can regain a positive trajectory for its students and its staff. Ms. Fields.
Thank you, Superintendent Hyde, and thank you, Ms. Bennett. I have a couple of questions. For the 3 categories, can you tell us how many of our schools are in each category?
For our CS&I category, we have a total of 38 schools. That includes both public and charter. For TS&I, we have a total of 4, and then everyone else kind of falls under ATS&I. That's our largest group that we currently have.
How many was CSI, please?
CS&I was 38.
Well, I wanted to give a shout out to Mr. Darriford Jones, Kathleen High School. We had a community meeting last week, and he really emphasized the school improvement plan. He talked about the different categories, and he talked about the things that we had to have in place at Kathleen High School because of where we fell, so in that area. So they are actually going out and speaking about it in the community, and it really is, to me, very valuable for the community to understand that they have a heavy lift, but they're able to do it because they have a plan in place.
That's great, and that's really what we want to hear, because that should ultimately guide the work that's happening at the school, and everybody that's involved in the school should be aware of what the school's goals are so that they can help the school meet those goals.
Well, he's doing his thing.
Good.
I think, Ms. Fields, to your point, it also provides the community with information they need. More often than not, they continually ask us, how can we help? Here's the roadmap as to how you can help. Mentoring, tutoring, other opportunities for our students. So, but Mr. Jones, I saw his advertisement for his community meeting, so I'm glad it was well attended and well received. Ms. Miller.
Hi, I don't know that we've had a chance to meet, but I want to say I was at a school yesterday, and I visited 2 of the two out of the 4 lowest performing elementary schools in Lakeland. They're not in my district, but I have attachments there to the staff and to the students. And I want to say publicly that 2 of those 4 that I did get to meet with complimented you on your approach to that school, to those schools and their issues. Those principals take on a tough job. If you look at the demographic and the performance and the outliers that academies have pushed, it's kind of the unintended consequence of choice. A couple of them, their zone in general is ridiculously large because we pulled out choice, which is fine, but it kind of leaves those schools in a place they weren't in 10 years ago. And sometimes those principals feel that pressure harder than anyone else. And you were spoken of with someone with kindness and who cared about the principals and the schools. And I just want to say I appreciate that. That hasn't always been our tactics. I can just be very honest. In the past, it hasn't always been with compassion. But if you're giving them the tools and they're implementing the tools, I want them to feel supported in their roles. So I appreciate what you do in the manner that you do it.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
There are no further questions.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next up is Ms. Candy Amato, Senior Director for Charter Schools. She's here to talk with you about Polk State College Collegiate High School's charter contract modification.
Good morning. So before you, you have just a simple contract modification, Polk State Collegiate Lakeland campus, sorry, it's a mouthful, and the Winter Haven campus, which will come to you at a later date, are seeking to add 10th grade to next school year to their grade component. So they will serve grades 10 through 12, as high-performing charter school statute does allow them to make that modification.
Ms. Miller?
Hi, Ms. Amato. How are you today?
Great, how are you?
Good. I've heard from both parents and staff, including the provost of this school, and this is something the community supports greatly. And so I spend more time probably on the Lakeland campus than the Winter Haven, and I know they're excited to have this. And as a high-performing charter, we're excited to have that for them. This is an easy one today, so thank you for being here.
And just to note, Mrs. Miller, the Winter Haven the Winter Haven campus, they're under contract renewal this year, so we will incorporate the 10th grade into their new contract. So you will not see a separate modification for the Winter Haven campus.
Thank you.
Ms. Wyatt?
Thank you. I just want to confirm this doesn't change their enrollment number or their max enrollment capacity.
Correct.
What are they currently, where are they currently and what is their current capacity?
So both the Winter Haven and the Lakeland campus are approved for 350 students. The Lakeland campus currently sits with 334 students, and the Winter Haven campus currently sits with 314 students.
Have they given any indication as to whether they're looking to make it more balanced 10th, 11th, 12th, or if they're...
So I'll read to you exactly what the Lakeland principal sent me because he knew those were going to be questions that we were going to be asked. Moving forward to add 10th grade beginning in the 24-25 school year. CHS and COL are not asking for an increase in student enrollment, since the new model will keep the same enrollment cap but divide the number into 3 smaller grades. The 10th grade will be a rigorous high school curriculum designed to ensure students are ready to transition into full college dual enrollment engagement in the 11th and 12th grade years on the college campus. This is the model that all of the other collegiate high schools in the state have always followed or have transitioned to in the last few years, with some adopting a full high school model of 9 through 12.
Awesome. So they'll look at more 120 per class instead of 175?
Yep.
Okay. Thank you.
There are no further questions, Ms. Amato. Thank you very much. Madam Chair, members of the board, I will go to the next item, and then afterwards we'll take a short break. The next one is policy updates, and I want to provide a little bit of background on this because while there appear to be 16 revisions to policy, they really fall into specific clusters. And there are over 80 policies that need to be updated based off last year's legislative changes and Neola's recommendations. And so I just want to make sure the board understands these are clustered by topic. They're minor changes. We are working with Mr. Bridges and others because there are certain areas that we have now been told may not require necessarily board approval. If it's essentially changing a few words and the policy in and of itself remains intact, then it may not have to come before the board for an official vote. You will always be informed. Please don't misconstrue that to mean that the board, we would change a board policy without the board being informed. That's not what I'm saying. It's that it may not necessarily require official board approval because, again, over 80 policies need to be revised and updated to ensure that we're in compliance based off, again, legislative action last year and recommendations from Neola. Ms. Griffin, it's yours. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Hyde. As Mr. Hyde mentioned, there are 16 policies today, but the clusters that he's talking about, there's really 7 different topics that we're talking about today. And most of these, Chad likes to refer to them as like low-hanging fruit. We tried to As Mr. Hyde mentioned, we have a number of policies that we're going to be bringing before you over the next several months to try to get up to date and to be in compliant. And these are some that it strictly changes based off Neola's revisions. We worked with staff to make sure it does work for our district, but there's not additional like staff input language in these policies. It's really taken straight from the legislative update and put into our policy. So the changes are minimal in these policies before you today. The first group of policies, policy 1242 and 3242, professional learning. And this is just a terminology change. It's going from professional development to professional learning. So you'll see that policy where that terminology is updated throughout. Policy 2122 is our...
Ms. Griffin, if you could stop there for a second. Board members, just for clarification, this is what I was trying to capture earlier when I just said, essentially, it's not a Scribner's error, but, per se, but you're just changing a word from professional development to professional learning. Those are the types of things that we will bring to you in two different formats, right? Those will come to you as a list. The other ones will come to you as formal board policy revisions, just so you're aware of that. Go ahead, Ms. Griffin.
Did Ms. Cunningham?
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, ma'am.
I do not agree with that. I think every policy that comes onto the school board campus, whether it's the word "the" to "it" or "a" to whatever, I think does need to come before the board as a vote, because then you're going to have to figure out where that line is. And we've never done that. I think if you have a list of them, I'm okay with that. I think you provide the list and we vote on it as a group. If there's 2 words here, 1 word there, but it still gives the board an opportunity, particularly new board members, to review those and to be officially voted on. And then for the others, I understand they'll be individual. But I think you could group and cluster those and give us a vote with 10 or however many, and that way at least it comes before the board for a vote. That would be my suggestion.
Yes, ma'am, and I believe that's why I provided the disclaimer that this is still in discussion with Mr. Bridges, because as I said, we were informed that that's a policy or practice we could use. It doesn't mean that's necessarily what we would do. So thank you for the clarification and for your input.
Thank you.
Go ahead, Ms. Griffin.
Okay, policy 2120 is our school improvement policy, and this is, the language is updated based on House Bill 7039, and it just requires districts, it's that early warning indicator for students in K through 4 with substantial mathematics deficiency. Policy 2370 is our educational options, and previously, this policy required that a student submit an application to the superintendent for approval when they wanted to participate in a particular educational option. And I want to clarify, make sure it's clear that we're not talking about like magnet or, charter schools, anything like that. It's the, independent study, early college entrance, those types of educational opportunities for students. So instead of an application having to go before the superintendent, they would just submit it to the district, and as long as they meet the eligibility requirements, the student would be permitted to participate. The next group of policies are all weapons related. Previously, we had a number of policies, as you can see, that are titled weapons. Policy 1217, 3217, and 4217 are being recommended to be deleted because all of those policies are different employee groups, and policy 7217 now encompasses all of those groups. So Neola is working with districts to try to get rid of duplicate policies whenever possible. And so now that 7217 includes all employee groups, there's not a need to have, an instructional employee group, a support administrator, a policy for weapons, because it's the same for all of those groups. Sometimes we do have policies that are specific for those groups, but weapons is not one of those. Policies 5772 and 7217 are just updated to provide some definitions and modify language. There's a Florida statute 790-115, gives the board the authority to waive the exception to allow firearms in vehicles. So basically that statute would allow districts to say if a student was of age and allowed to carry, they could have that firearm in their vehicle. But our Safe Schools Department is not recommending that we waive that exception. We don't want students to be able to have weapons in their vehicles on campus, so our policy reflects that.
Hang on, Ms. Griffin. Ms. Miller?
I'll wait to the end.
Okay.
Go ahead, Ms. Griffin.
Okay. Policy 5771 is the search and seizure policy. And this is being revised based on House Bill 1537, requiring that any search of a student's personal belongings is done so discreetly. And that's, the language is taken straight from that bill. And it just says that if we're going through a student's belongings, we need to do that discreetly. We can't just, dump it all out on a table, and then we need to return those items to the student if they're items that are allowed once we search that. The next two groups of policies are all human resource related policies, and they're updated based on Senate Bill 676. So the first group is employment administrators, instructional staff, and support staff. And that's just being, the language is being revised to address when a person is ineligible for educator certification or employment in any position that, where they come in contact with students. And then the next group is the background screening of all those different employee groups. And there's a new statutory requirement related to the care provider background screening clearinghouse. So it's just statute changes based on how our employees are, how we put employees through a background check. Those are all the policy changes for you today. I know that there are questions for us, so.
Ms. Miller.
No, thank you. It's more about the process. In the past, Neola was something that we agreed to use along with a few other states, but it could be kind of confusing when we show the Neola, we show what their recommendations are and strike through what our recommendations are. I don't know if it needs to be discussed amongst the board, but I think since we've added staff attorneys to the district, that I would be more confident in the final version coming to us being from those attorneys and not just based on Neola, because sometimes I question Neola, and I know they studied the state of Florida's legislation, but I think our own staff knows it more than that company would. So when I know it's reviewed and it's based on a recommendation, but I'm more confident in our employees reviewing and making recommendations and not trying to compare the two, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think so. I want to make sure that I was clear. I don't know if this is what you're saying, but when we do get those changes from Neola, we work with those departments to make sure that whatever the recommended changes are, they work for our district. And if they do have any additional input or things that we need to modify, we do make those changes before we bring them to you. So it's not solely based off of exactly what Neola recommends if we need to make changes.
Right. I just think the last changes that we made in the last work session or last meeting, it got confusing to the public because we were crossing out things that were never in our policies to begin with. They were the recommendations from Neola. So I think in moving forward, I would like to see what's brought to us is based on just our staff attorneys' recommendations, if that makes sense.
And not necessarily see the strike through and
If it doesn't,
from Neola.
well, if it doesn't apply to us, if it hasn't been in our policy already in the past, I don't know that we would have seen strike-throughs from recommendations.
Okay.
If that makes sense. Strike-throughs, to me, when I've read policy, strike-through is, we're striking the words that are currently in our policies. To strike through a recommendation, I think, is confusing.
Okay, that makes sense. I know there was discussion at one point about making sure that all the board members could see what Neola was recommending, and so that's why we were doing it that way. But if it's, the pleasure of the board and Mr. Hyde, we can certainly, take that out. I understand
When they
what
see
you're
the
saying.
strike-throughs, they're reading that we're taking something
taking
out of our
something out.
policy, and we're not. Sometimes we are, but we're not always doing that. Thank you. Thank you.
From the school board attorney's perspective, we'll certainly work with the district staff superintendent, however the board wants us to make that as transparent and clear a process as the board desires, so.
We try to make minimal confusion.
We'll still be involved and happy to, on behalf of Wes and myself and others, to work with superintendent and his staff and whomever else locally may be helpful to the process.
Thank you.
Ms. Fields.
I wasn't at the last work session. I was sick, but I was watching online. And when the policy update was done, one of the policies was very in-depth, sexual harassment, I believe. And there really wasn't a lot of discussion, but there was a lot of changes on that policy. And so all that I would request going forth is that when a policy comes before us and it is very detailed with changes, that we really take the time to walk through that policy. Because I just think that it's important that we understand what we are actually going to be voting on, because we vote on that policy, I believe, at the October board meeting.
It'll be December. Where we'll,
December?
yes, ma'am.
Because you have to advertise it.
Yeah, we'll do
Okay.
the authority to advertise in October, and then the next available board meeting will be December 12th.
Okay. And then whatever is recommended by the superintendent and the attorneys related to Ms. Miller's comments, I just want to make sure that we're all in agreement on that and what that's going to look like.
There's, and we did get clarification, there is already existing policy that would go under consent. It doesn't require action. So those things that are typically, those single word changes would still be listed for board approval, but be done under consent. Board member can always request it be moved for discussion, but we would list them under consent, and Ms. Dodge was able to clarify that for me, and that's how we've historically done those.
Okay, I don't have a problem with that. I just wanted to make sure board
we
members
are.
know that the two main things that we're supposed to do by statute is to approve the budget and policies.
Yes, ma'am.
And I just think that it's important for us to understand, we just don't rush through policies, especially when it's something that is, a lot has been revised and changed with a specific policy, and that sexual harassment policy last work session, there was a lot of changes on there.
Yes,
I don't
ma'am.
know if the other board members recognize that.
There was quite a bit of strike through, you're right. And again, I tried to provide the board with the best summary based off several of the questions I received. And, you know, sexual orientation and gender preference is irrelevant in a conversation about sexual harassment, because everyone's protected by, under both Title VII federal policy and Title IX federal policy. That, again, the act of harassment, regardless of sexual orientation, regardless of gender preference, it's still sexual harassment. We have a legal obligation to fulfill that. So I thank you for the opportunity for me to clarify that further for community. I think that gets back to what Ms. Miller was saying is, you know, sometimes there's language in there for cleanup that, and again, those same rights are protected. I think I listed for the board 9 other policies that I fully expect Neola to start consolidating, because we have 7 policies we have a same policy for students, for staff, for employees, and it just gets very redundant, and we have a lot of policy out there that needs to be, we have a lot of cleanup. I would even challenge that the title of that policy, because it speaks to sexual harassment. When you looked at the title of the policy we were discussing, it was about equal access to academic programs and activities, which had nothing to do with the actual policy of sexual harassment. So some of it's going to be title changes and for clarification as well, but absolutely, you know, we'll make sure that we provide that. I was glad we were able to provide that clarification. It always goes under consent plus action, but you're absolutely right. And there'll be an opportunity for further discussion in December before the board votes on that particular policy as well.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. Ms. Miller.
I think that's what I was referring to, where there was a lot of strike-throughs in that policy that weren't words in our current policy.
Right.
They were Neola's suggestions. But when we showed them a strike-through, they were read from the public as we were taking something away from a policy that wasn't in there. So I think the way that we discussed it and the attorney's discussing, it'll make it less confusing. But I agree that anything with that many changes, the public wants discussion or at least a further explanation before we vote on it. So thank you.
I see no further questions.
If I can just add one more thing, because this will not be up until December, we have a fairly light load due to deadlines for the next work session. If you would like, I'd be more than happy to walk through that policy again at our next work session before it's advertised that evening. Basically, this is a brand-new policy. It's dealing with our grievance process for sexual harassment. That's strictly what it is. We are required to have this process in place by Title IX from the federal regulations. There are some reasons why the policy, I mean, we've been holding on to this policy for a few years now, trying to figure it out, and it's changed a few times from Neola. So I think the title at one point may have made more sense. Now it doesn't, and it's been very streamlined to just address the grievance process. So if you would like, at the next work session, I'd be more than happy to use our policy time. We won't have as many policies before you. I can walk through that a little bit more in depth for you and explain exactly what it's going to be before you come back in December.
Thank you, Mr. Davis. Seeing no further questions at this time, I'd like to take a 15-minute break. Chair Wyatt?
Yes, just real quick before we go to break, you should have each received 4 emails about evaluations for our staff members. If before we leave today, you can just check and make sure you got all 4, just to make sure we typed your email address correctly. So we'll talk more about it at the end. I just wanted to make sure before we go on break that I let you know that they were there. So, but yes, 15 minutes is perfect. 10:30?
Yes, ma'am. Okay, 10:30. Pasco. Get your water. Welcome back, everyone. At this time, I'm going to introduce Ms. Ann Pasco, Assistant Superintendent for Information Systems and Technology. She's also joined by Hugo. I can't pronounce your last name. Say it for me. Pascoa, thank you. The Director for Systems and Network. They're here to talk and give you an update on Incident IQ.
Good morning, everyone. Glad to see you again. I brought my colleague, Mr. Pascoa, kicking and screaming with me today. He prefers to be the silent partner who does all the work, but I think it's very important that you see the people who are doing the work, especially with something that has taken on such a life of its own here at the district. So as a reminder, we brought to you Incident IQ a few months ago, back in the spring. We did it as a pilot to make sure that it worked well. We used 3 different schools, and these are the types of modules that they give us. I'm not going to read to you all the pieces, but it's basically a help desk that lets us look at our work, establish priorities, and make sure we're able to get that through the district as we need to provide support for all the technology. It also does asset management so that we can manage all of the devices, our financial responsibility, and any concerns we might have about how we implement those pieces with fidelity. It has also the HR delivery service model, which lets us look at the onboarding process and allows buildings to look at where their staff is in that process as well. So the update for you is we did complete the pilot phase back in January and March. We had 3 schools to look at that, got feedback from principals, teachers, network managers to make sure that we were doing it well, had a lot of lessons learned. Mr. Pesco and his team worked quite a bit to make sure that we implemented new processes based upon those lessons learned, and then we went full bore. Oops, I think we've missed a slide here. Yep. Well, we're missing quite a few slides, so we're just going to wing it. We'll make sure we get those slides to you so that you can see them later. So the statistics that were implemented, that we did gather through there in July, we did approximately 5,000 tickets. In August, there were approximately 22,000 tickets, and in September, 21,000 tickets. So I want to wrap our heads around that for a minute. That's quite a few tickets that the IT staff is handling. We have 150 network managers and approximately 110 IT staff. We expect those numbers to go down a little bit, but it has shown us where we have areas of concern in gaps of coverage, how to make sure that we're getting tickets that teachers need a subject matter expert to, ensure network managers are aware of who that is, and make sure that we can get all of the correct support back to the appropriate building. So we're in that process of looking at, are our zones set up correctly? Do we have all the right pieces set up the way we need to have them? And are we getting gaps in learning? Do we need to provide extra training? With that said, we continue to provide training to teachers all through the summer and through the fall. They have voluntary trainings they can attend virtually. Administrators have now been trained on how to run reports, so it also gives information to administrators so they can see exactly what support is needed in their building, what questions are being asked. They also have an escalation path, which comes up through me if a ticket sits too long for a need. So we're in the process of learning all of those pieces. What's the biggest takeaway about this platform? The biggest takeaway that I can see is that we are becoming used to using data to make sure that we can look at how do our kids need to learn and how do we go from point A to point B. On the operations side, we need to do the same thing. We need to know how many tickets are coming in to ensure that we're asking for the appropriate staff to support them. We need to quantify what those are. We need to look at that data to analyze where we might have pockets of issues. Where can we ascertain to be good stewards of our resources, both human and monetarily, to make sure that we're providing that for the staff and students at Polk County. So as promised, we did the implementation, then the full pilot, and we promised you at the end of first quarter we would bring you an update. Mr. Pescoa, since we don't have all our slides, anything I forgot?
No, I think that was it.
I told you, a man of few words. He says I'm good. With that, I'm not sure if you might have any questions for us.
Ms. Miller.
Hello.
Hello.
I just want to make sure, I know we had a conversation last week or so where staff members were asking all these questions, and the first thing we asked is, did you put a ticket in? And they really don't know, and they haven't. And they've even gone to their IT manager, IT network person, and they didn't tell them to go put a ticket in. So how is that gotten? And we have a lot of schools and a lot of personnel, and not everyone reads those weekly emails, even if they're color-coded as emergent.
Correct.
And so what are we doing to prevent that, or to help get the message out, other than like our principals? This might be a superintendent question. Our principals being encouraged to have, like, we want people to advocate for themselves. We want the teacher to learn how to do that. Are we encouraging that? Because there's too many teachers that still are frustrated because things aren't happening, but they're not putting tickets in to get them to happen. And I don't know how to make them do that, or help them understand they have to do that to get it resolved.
Well, what you're looking at really is change management.
Right.
So it's very hard in an educational environment where our focus is, we want to focus first on the learning, to remember that there are foundational pieces of support that have to occur in order for the learning to happen. And technology tends to be one of those that we just assume will work. So we really don't put a lot of effort personally into learning all of those things. Think about how many people get a new phone, have the phone delivered to their house, and then get frustrated because they don't know how to use it. So it is a challenge. It's a challenge because we don't want to force people to come to trainings and take away from the work that Teaching and Learning and Division of Schools is doing to support the learning, but we want to make sure they're aware. So we continue to send those out. We do exactly what you're talking about. When anyone reaches out to me, we encourage, do you have an IQ ticket? That's the answer. People then say, I'm frustrated. We then explain why. And slowly but surely, that environment will happen. I'm confident that once we get to February or March, we'll have a completely different conversation happening. It is important for us to know we need to continue that work, and I do appreciate you sharing that with us. And we just have to continue to send those district weekly updates out, make sure that people are aware, make sure we look at the tickets. We have been doing training for network managers every early release as well.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
There are no further questions. Thank you.
Thank you.
Board members, the next item up is redistricting. This conversation actually started last November, almost a full year ago, and then the board has been provided multiple updates throughout the year, beginning in June of 2023. I provided the board with some examples of what redistricting might look like in our school district. Based off your feedback, we revised that mapping. We also worked to make sure that many of you had concerns that when you looked at the GIS software, that you could not see necessarily your magnet schools or charter schools, so we made sure that those were added. I resent the link to you today so that you have the most current information for you. There was one recent revision. You received a handout from me prior to the meeting. It's at your seat, that shows how the balancing continues to be reconfigured for the redistricting. And what we find now is that every district will now be within 101 to relatively 103,000 residents. It's not based off student population, as many of you are aware. It's based off residents. And so the last time that this was done by the school district was anywhere from 10 to 12 years ago. Last time the school district addressed redistricting was in 2011 or 2013. Since that time, we know that we have grown significantly. In particular, our growth has happened within certain communities, and so it is time. And the board brought this concept and this idea to myself and Mr. Bridges with the interest for us to address this prior to December, because it has to be done in an odd year, for clarification and to help address any concerns that should redistricting result in any sitting board member now residing outside of the new district, that board member retains their seat until the next election. That was confirmed with both the Florida School Boards Association and the Department of Education. And the reason for that is there are some inherent protections there, because it actually prevents a school board from taking punitive action against one of their own. That should a school board member necessarily be in conflict with the rest of the board could, by virtue of redistricting, remove a school board member. And so again, that is not allowed. So any school board member that would be displaced based off the newly proposed redistricting, if the board were to approve those, retains their seat until the next election cycle. We were able to clarify that. Again, the discussion began almost a full year ago in November. Options were provided based off the initial feedback. Again, we revised it. The most recent one places every district within 101 to 104,000 residents. Since that time, as I shared, one additional revision was made. You have that in front of you. That's also included. It is now option 6 under the GIS software link that you were provided. This process does need to be completed. If it's to be done this year, it needs to be completed by December in order for us to move forward. So.
And just to add to that, Superintendent Hyde, we are responsible for doing it as soon as we get the information from the census data, was the conversation that Wes and I had last summer when we got the census data. However, school districts, everyone except the state legislature is required to do them in the odd number years. So this would be the year that we're supposed to do it, because currently our districts are very inequitable when it comes to population-wise.
Correct. Mr. Sharpless.
I've got a few things. First, I'm a little confused from what you just said. You said everyone is within around 103,000, but the information that you gave us, the handout, that's not accurate. We have 102,000, 109,000, 101,000, so it's not.
The recommendation's option 5, correct?
Okay, then
Well, the previous recommendation was option 5. Option 6 addresses some issues that we identified with redistricting and how it would adversely affect certain individuals. And so we wanted to make sure that we address those issues. And you can, by gerrymandering, you don't have to have completely equitable demographics across the board. However, the census data very clearly shows that there is a large disproportionate number of residents within certain communities. This does, by virtue of that, address that. And I was referring, just for clarification, Mr. Sharpless, I was referring to option 5 as the 101.
Not option 6,
No,
okay?
sir.
Just some other concerns. As I mentioned last time, I asked a specific question. I asked, is this going to affect any of the current candidates that is listed? That is currently filed. And only reason I asked that is because I remember as a candidate, I had to look through, make sure I was in the right district. And, at this point, a lot of candidates there's some candidates that have filed, they've done fundraising, they've been working. And really the only thing that the redistricting does is really just affects the election. Because even though we are all in our different districts, right, technically, where we live, we're all Polk County School Board members. Yes, there are certain, we call them our district schools, but we really are responsible for all the schools in Polk County. That's why we're elected countywide, and we're not elected by our districts. And so I'm just concerned because of an issue that I did bring up. I want to be, first of all, guaranteed that this isn't affecting any candidates, but also there's candidates that might still come out for the election. We're still, it's October. The election's less than a year away. There might still be candidates that file. I just feel like even though this process was started a year earlier, that we really should have made a decision earlier than now. And again, this isn't any fault. I'm not pointing the finger or giving the fault to any person. I just feel like we could have made this a little more expedient and done this quicker. And then candidates would know exactly what district they would fall into quicker. So it's just my opinion, but I don't think that we should redistrict right now, this late in the game, for candidates to potentially be drawn out of a district that they were thinking about running for. I just remember where I was at. I would have already been filed when I ran, and it would have been October of 21. And I just feel like we should have done this earlier, and that's just my opinion. And so I would suggest that we postpone this until after this next election, for the simple fact that we're kind of already late in the game, in my opinion. So that's my feedback on it. Because we don't know what other candidates might be drawn out.
So, two things. when we were first asked this question, the team did verify using existing information that every current candidate remained within their boundaries. You brought to our attention one additional issue. We've addressed that. We've addressed it fully. Delaying this, respectfully, it's been almost 12 years since the board has last addressed this. And since that time, the growth in Polk County has been absolutely exceptional, which creates significant imbalance in districts for voting, for election purposes, for management of schools, for management of students, and all of those issues. And while you're all elected district-wide, let me be clear, this is not a function of the superintendent's office to redistrict. I am lending my staff to support this because it was an interest of the board. The speed in which it's taking place is because, quite frankly, I have other priorities to manage our school district. And we've provided this information to you in a timely manner, going all the way back to the very beginning of the school year. In fact, going back to last school year, starting in June and July. So if the board takes action in December or by December, then any potential candidate who has not filed will have the information he or she needs in order to file properly. But to not redistrict, considering the growth that we've had, creates a significant imbalance in all of your districts. It's your decision, not mine. But I offer that counter. Ms. Wyatt.
Thank you, Mr. Hyde. And I hate that Wes isn't here today, and you may know John, but I believe in our conversations, we are legally required to redistrict in as soon as we have it in the first odd year that comes after we have it. The reason that it's done in odd years is because that gives basically a full year for someone that's looking to run to get into the race. Looking at the districts, I don't know if you have someone that you know that is planning to come out and run, but I know that the team did go back. Anyone that has filed is still in the district that they have filed in. This really came about originally because I was a very new chair and did not know that this was something that we typically did, but had 3 different legislators call and say, hey, why haven't you done this yet? Which is when Wes and I discovered that it can only be done in odd years, and that we had to do it in an odd year. So I don't know that we have, we can just say, hey, we're not going to do it, but that's likely it could get called to look for the state to look at if we don't do it, because we are significantly imbalanced in what our district capacities are.
Ms. Fields.
My comments were going to be similar to Ms. Wyatt. I know that during the legislative session, there was some conversation about passing a bill that would allow you to run for any seat, no matter where you lived, and that was not approved, my understanding. However, I believe that if someone wants to run for someone's seat in a district where they currently might not be living, they don't have to qualify to live in that district until they do their qualifying papers. I believe that's what
That's correct.
is correct. I think that we've had this information for a minute now, and I think that we need to move forward. And if there's anything else that needs to be rectified, I think today needs to be the day that comes out for discussion so we can put this to bed and move on. That's my opinion on the matter.
Mr. Nolte.
I'm starting to get confused. I agreed with what Justin said, and I liked your point also. But this is a big thing. I know it's important to try to balance things out, but I almost think now that I would need a little more time to think about how we're going to do this and how things are going to go, because I'm a little confused right now. I'm thinking both ways.
Yeah, this is not a question before the board today. This will not come back before the board until next month.
Right.
But again, as I've said, the interest is to keep bringing you information so you can make an informed decision. So if you have questions, or we can have you meet with Mr. McLemore and his team to walk through the data, we'd be happy to schedule that time for you. Ms. Miller.
I think on this subject, as far as Chair Wyatt, said with her comments about being compliant, that would be my concern. I'm not concerned with people, holding this up in case anybody else wants to get in the race for school board. I'm afraid that we've waited too long already. Now, I do think that in the future, we should schedule it out so we don't come into this time frame and have these issues. But to push it out in hopes of someone, or, just to protect someone, or in the interest of someone who wants to run, I just don't know that we have time. I don't know that we have that time as a barrier. I think time is a barrier to this. So I would hate to delay it. So I know we're not deciding on this today, but redistricting needs to happen. I live in an area with a lot of growth as well as the east side, and I think that it's time that we do it. Thank you.
Ms. Cunningham?
Thank you. I have reservations similar to Mr. Sharpless, particularly when the question was asked at the last work session if the two candidates that have currently filed are in option 5, and we were told, yes, they were, and one of them was not. And I think that is very troubling to me, number one. I don't know why we were told that he or she was, and yet they're not. I don't know I really don't understand that. I feel like if you come in a public setting and you're asked a direct question, if you don't know, then I would say, look, I'm not sure, let me check. But to say, yeah, they're both, unequivocally, we checked both addresses and they're both in it, I don't think that's correct. So that's number one. Number two is I understand the points that have been made about the legislature, but quite frankly, they don't govern what we do. We as a board set those redistricting when we want to. If it has to be in an odd year, my suggestion is, because there are people out there that live in the current, because I'm affected, I get that, or my district is affected. There are people who may be coming out thinking that District 2 is remaining District 2. And I feel that and I support one of the candidates out there, so let me be clear. However, there are other people who are considering it, and to take the rug up from under them and say, oh, by the way, sorry, this whole area now is no longer in District 2, I don't think is right. Also, if it has to be in an odd-numbered year, which I just read the statute, I get that. 2025 is right around the corner, and my suggestion would be to wait until the 2024 election is over and then start looking to do that. So you're completely clean, you're starting from scratch. There's been some discussion here, but I just don't think midterm now is the right way to do it with an election 1 year away. And with one of the candidates who's been very vocal, very active. I mean, if others had not checked, that person would be not included in District 2, and all that he's done and campaigned and raised money and done his thing. I just think that's so disgraceful that, yeah, we were told, sure, we checked all the addresses, and yet we had not. So I don't know why this is coming before us. I know you say it's been a year and so forth. I don't remember a lot of discussion. Granted, I was not here in June, which is interesting as well, when this was discussed in depth. I don't really care what the district is, what the lines are, the boundaries. It really doesn't make a difference. We are Polk County School Board members for all of our kids, but I'm just trying to do what's right. And to me, it doesn't smell right when you come out a year before the election and go, oh, no, wait a minute, we're changing the rules here. So people that could or want to now potentially could not. I just don't think this is the time. You want to do it at the end of 24, the beginning of 25, and get ready for that, I think that's perfect, because then that person has, several years to get ready for that. So those are my comments, and I cannot support the redistricting as it stands. I don't know about this option 6. The only thing on my GIS maps goes up through option 5. So I can't really look at that. I don't know why that was done, another 6, but what I was communicated to and told is that we were going to be voting on option 5. So hopefully that'll get added to these maps at some point in time. Thank you.
So I will address the one comment that in any way I misled the board by saying those addresses were verified, because they were. And I will stand behind that. Because staff were directed to check those addresses and make sure, before I brought an option before the board, that I could definitively stand before you and our community and say, yes, they were checked. And so to make the comment that they were not, or that I misspoke or misled the board, is not appropriate. Because that is what you just said.
It is.
And that's wrong.
But
It's patently false.
I was told that that
And so,
gentleman,
and I explained that option 6 presently addresses that issue when we were made aware that there may be a second address for a particular individual candidate. I did not confirm what address they used, but as you know, candidates may have a PO box that we may have used, they may have a residence, they may have had a different address. And so I will go back and find out where the error occurred. However, the verification did take place, and we have amended it to make sure that it does not adversely impact anyone. When we were made aware of it, we amended it within hours.
so if
And
we
so
had
that's
not
why
made
you
you
have-
aware, then what would have happened?
In that case, then yes, that candidate would have to be excluded based off
Exactly.
the address that we reviewed.
That's what I'm saying.
And yet we did make the correction.
I understand. Now you did after, but it took.
But saying that we misled you intentionally is false.
You did.
Mr. Sharpless.
Another time, I've asked about redistricting, and I was told we can do it as many times as we'd like, and, multiple times during an odd year. So, I think we can ease, I personally think that, we could do what Board Member Cunningham said and wait to have it, work on it in 2024, have it ready for 2025 implementation. I'm just putting myself as a candidate. I just recently was a candidate, first time ever running for any political office. And I would have been filed by now. I'm just saying if in December we make the decision, I'm concerned that that decision has waited too long to be made. You're less than a year out. The election is in 9 months. To be told, hey, you're no longer in that district as a candidate, it just doesn't, and again, I'm not pointing any fingers. What I'm saying is it really puts the candidate at a disadvantage. And that's my opinion.
Ms. Miller?
I just want to clarify, and I don't know how a candidate would have multiple addresses, but if we have checked with the 2 current candidates that I'm aware of in the 1 district, my point is, I don't want to hold it up any longer. So if we say, and I can't get, it's not pulling up on my screen right this second because I used a different email. But if we checked with the addresses and confirmed that they're not them, I think we need to move forward. To hold it on for the person that may be still thinking about it, that could change overnight. But I understand if there's a candidate who's fundraised and been in it, I would hate to cut them out. I think that's unfair to do that. We have people that'll move into the district, in my race, within a week of qualifying just to qualify. And we can't prevent that either. But I think if we check the addresses of the current people who have filed, make sure that they are included, that we should move forward. I don't know that putting it off is going to help us be in compliance or delay it. And like we should have, we've already said should have been done sooner. Again, I didn't realize that, and I'm not looking at option 6, but looking at the option 5, I'm not realizing there was one cut out. But if we fix that issue, I don't know why we couldn't move ahead. Thank you.
Ms. Fields?
I had a question for Mr. Murphy. Mr. Murphy, is there a state statute that talks about this? Can you read that, please?
There is a state statute.
Can you tell us what it is?
I will be certainly happy to do that. But this is an issue that I really want Wes to be able to articulate in conjunction with Mr. Bridges. Wasn't prepared today to really get down into the weeds on this issue. As the superintendent has noted, this is a board issue, and this is not something that has to be voted on today or even at necessarily the next meeting. But my understanding is there is a statute 1001.36, and that there are certain time periods where that has to be, this redistricting by resolution of the board has to occur. My general understanding is that it can be done no later than 270 days prior to the November 5th, 2024 general election. So you have a very short window at this point, I presume. But that's something I would want to discuss with Mr. Bridges. That's a legal opinion that's very important for this board to make sure you get the correct advice. And with someone that's been working on it for obviously a period of time that Mr. Bridges has been working on it, and apparently having conversations with board members and superintendent and others about these matters. And as the superintendent noted, he was kind enough to allow his staff to assist and facilitate in this process. I think that we just need to make sure that Mr. Bridges is here. I'm happy to help, though, obviously.
Thank you, and thank you for that answer. And I didn't mean to put you on the spot. I would never do that. I think that we need to have this discussion at the next work session. When is Mr. Bridges going to be returning?
He'll be here for the October 24th meeting.
Okay, and he can be prepared to help us work through this. Then Superintendent Hyde, thank you for allowing your staff to do the work. And as you said earlier, you got a whole lot to chew on. And so adding this to your list, we appreciate that.
I'll find a board meeting as well, because Mr. Bridges did address this in an open session with the board. He read the statute and highlighted for the board all the policies and rules behind the redistricting, so I'll relocate that for the board and make sure we send you that link so you can rewatch that video as well. Thank you. Ms. Wyatt?
Thank you, and I believe that was February or March it was early this calendar year, if not the end of last year. I just wanted to comment, so looking at the Polk Elections website, it does look like there are a couple candidates that have used P.O. boxes instead of their address, so my guess is that is probably what staff looked at, because Superintendent Hyde and I had multiple conversations to make sure that they were all checked. The statute went into effect on July 1st, that had they been, we legally cannot, any candidate, district them out of, or move them out of the district based on zoning. So had that happened, it would have had to come back to the board to be fixed before the election. But again, this is something that they expect us to get done because we are required to have balanced districts based on the census. So the fact that we have the census numbers, I would be very concerned that we would be out of compliance if we wait until 2025. These, again, just as a reminder, these don't go into effect until 2024 election. So these would not be in effect for the next year. Even though we would vote on them in November, they would not go into effect until the next term happens. That's all my comments.
Mr. Sharpless?
I also would like to revisit the comments that Mr. Bridges made. So that link would be very helpful for me, Superintendent, as well as hearing directly from him. I would like to be in compliance. I think that's important. So it would help to inform me and put my mind at ease of any votes that would have to happen. So I appreciate that.
Seeing no further questions or comments, that item is finished. Mr. Pitts, we're going to jump ahead to budget and staffing. We will close today's workshop with a closed session. We will not reconvene following that closed session, Madam Chair.
I'll say good morning. Okay, I've got just three position changes I'd like to bring forward to you today, and then it will come back before you on at the October 24th, 2023 board meeting. The first position is a new coordinator of corrective reading, implementation, and professional development. This position would be funded through ESSER, funding through September 30th, 2024. And then going forward, if this position is deemed that we want to keep this position, we'll be proposing, it would be proposed to be funded under Title I and Title II dollars. This position will report directly to the Senior Director of K-12 Literacy. And this would be hired under a limited employment agreement, which is what we typically do with grant positions, as those agreements will state that the position goes away if grant funding is not available. Previously, we used contracted dollars to perform these duties. And those contracted dollars in previous years were $70,000 in total. The total cost with benefits for this position is $78,349. Are there any questions about that particular position?
Ms. Miller?
I just have a question about how we do the grant-funded positions, and I don't know how many we have under some of the grants. Is it hard to recruit people on this limited basis? I know sometimes we move them into other departments, but I just want to make sure we're able to recruit for these positions. If people think it's very limited, they may not take the opportunity.
At times, there have been situations in which it was hard to hire, and it's really depending upon the grant information. For instance, this one is ESSER dollars, which those ESSER dollars go away next year. And so if we go back 10, 12 years when we had the previous stimulus dollars after that recession, we did have a few issues in hiring, but it has not been a consistent problem.
And then this position will be budgeted if we see to continue it after the grants.
That's correct.
Okay.
That's the plan.
Thank you.
Any other questions for that position?
Yeah, I'm just going to clarify further, Mr. Pitts. So the cost that Mr. Pitts provided you for the contracted service with corrective reading was just slightly below what this will cost us for salaries. But please keep in mind, that is because I refused to renew a second contract for additional PD and training, because that would have taken it well over that $70,000, $100,000 mark, and I'd prefer we hire a full-time person versus just pay for intermittent professional development from that parent company. So it is important for us to clarify that this would have cost us far more had we maintained a contract with this organization versus looking to hire somebody full-time into this position.
No more questions. I will move on to the next position. We'll be moving into the area of facilities and operations under Assistant Superintendent Mr. Harry Fix. The first request under this department is to upgrade the Director of Architect Services and Code Compliance to a Senior Director position of Architect Services and Code Compliance. The total cost with benefits will be to the general fund, and that's in the amount of $23,058. And this requested increase from a director to a senior director is reflective of the duties and the level of responsibility this position has taken over the last few years. This position directs and coordinates all architect services, either in-house or coordinates and oversees with contracted architect services and code compliance. And then during the summer district reorganization, we added several subordinate positions to this director of architect services and code compliance, including additional fire and safety inspector. This will bring a second senior director under the umbrella of facilities for Mr. Fix. The other umbrella really focuses on maintenance services. Are there any questions regarding that position?
It's not technically just this position. I was just curious if we can have an explanation on the director to senior director. You said the justification is there's increased responsibilities. Is there a document or anything that we have where it lays out exactly, okay, this position, director, has this amount of responsibility versus senior director? Just so we can have a justification for future positions. Hey, how do we know what level this position should be at? I mean, we have a great recommendation from you. I just would like to know where the thresholds are, if that makes sense. Or is it just something that we kind of decide I don't,
I hate to say that it's more subjective, but it is really more subjective. We don't have an objective document that states like a certain position oversees 100 folks and that makes them
Okay.
X amount. We look at the amount of responsibility in other departments, and we usually also look at the level of responsibility in other school districts.
okay.
And that's really where we make those recommendations on what level there is, especially when it gets over like a manager type of position, but it's more subjective.
So it's comparing ourselves to other like-sized districts
Yes.
and departments within our district. Gotcha.
Yes, sir.
Okay, makes sense. Thank you.
Any other
Further questions?
No questions? Okay, the last change, and I keep it on the same slide, is the upgrade of 8 maintenance service specialists from a salary grade 17 to a salary grade of 19. And it would also bring forth a change of title to manager of maintenance services. These are the folks that oversee the maintenance, the various maintenance shops across the district. And we had a salary review committee look at these positions, and that's where the recommendation came to upgrade them from a salary grade 17 to a 19. According to our administrative salary guide, that would be a salary increase for these folks of 10%. But this really brings them in line with the service managers that we see in the transportation department. And what was attached is some updated language also to the meat of their job description. And the total of that increase is $55,066 to the general fund. And no further questions. This will come back before you at the next board meeting for your approval.
I don't see any, Mr. Pitts.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, sir. Last remaining items, an information item. The board receives this on a regular basis regarding our Head Start Services report. And Madam Chair, members of the board, at this time, seeing no further questions or comments regarding items, we will go to closed session. We will clear this room. We will make sure that IT turns off. Sorry? Oh, sorry. Go ahead. Sorry.
I'm going to take my meeting back over.
Yes, ma'am.
Before and I'll open up the floor to members that may have some of their liaison reports, but evaluations for superintendent, internal auditor, general counsel, and executive assistant all need to be completed. You should have received 4 emails, one for each of those earlier today. It's the same, if you were on the board last year and completing evaluations, it's the same system. It should be your same password from last year. If you can't remember your password, there's a nice little button that says reset password, and it'll send it to your email address. But if you have any trouble, I'll stick around afterwards. We can troubleshoot together. For our new board members, the email actually comes from JotForm, and it'll say create an account. You'll have to use your school board email address, and you can make the password whatever you want. And then it will, if you click on the link for each of them, it'll take you directly to them, or on your JotForm, it'll say forms assigned to me, and they're all listed under there as well. So if you have any questions, feel free to ask myself, or Yvette and Linda can also help with that. I was looking at October 31st to have those in. That's 3 weeks from today. And that'll allow me to complete those with our staff before the holidays. Any questions? Ms. Cunningham?
Thank you. Regarding the evaluations, and I did get the emails this morning as the meeting progressed here. Regarding the superintendent's evaluation, not the others, just for superintendent, I would like to suggest us discussing the ability to maybe hire a consultant. I feel that if we had a consultant involved, like we used to have, and obviously that person is doing their own thing, so I don't have any particular person in mind, but I felt that I think we did a much better job as a board being able to evaluate in a more comprehensive way when there was a third party involved, rather than getting all the information from, giving all the information. I just feel like there needs to be a line there, and we don't have it. So I don't know how the board feels. Maybe it's not a discussion for today because Mr. Allen isn't here and Wes, but I just feel to do a proper evaluation on our superintendent, I just think if we hired a consultant, it would be a much more thorough evaluation with information gathered, information we got, then we would present it. I just felt like they went really well before doing that. And this past year, we declined doing that, and I just think we should get back to that way of doing evaluations just for the superintendent. I understand staff is what we do individually. So just my thoughts, wanted to share that publicly.
Ms. Miller?
My experience on the board is I just didn't find value in that third party, spending the dollars on that. I think that if we can evaluate part of our staff, we should be able to evaluate all of our staff and have those discussions. I do think that we should be having discussions with staff based on, I don't want anything to be a surprise to staff. So if we're going to evaluate them, we need to have the discussion with them first. So and this is a complete board decision. I don't support spending dollars for a third party for one of the staff members. I think that even new board members, if you need training on how to evaluate someone, I think FSBA could probably assist with that. But we are more than capable of evaluating all of our staff members without those extra dollars. I didn't find it was the way we did it last time with a third party, it was some kind of the rating system. I think it was interesting that it was available to us, and but the holistic values we were giving, I just in the past and in public and corporate America, I haven't seen that before. Holistic ratings. I think it should be based on your experience and the things you can discuss individually with each employee. So I wouldn't support that, but it's obviously a board decision to spend dollars to help us evaluate. Thank you.
Ms. Fields?
Well, I would say that there is value in the way that we did it years ago. I think that it allowed more in-depth conversation and some things that were said. And I know when we talked about this process, Superintendent Hyde said something like, I have thick skin, and I don't really have a problem with you voicing whatever your concerns are. And he does have thick skin. I can testify to that.
Trying to break it down.
But I understand the value, so to say that there's no value in it, I would disagree. I think there is value in that process. The idea of doing everything pretty much electronically can sometimes be a little bit over the top for some of us. I mean, you work through it, and you get it done. It would be interesting to note if we were to consider having a third person to look at the process for the superintendent's evaluation, what that will look like as it relates to cost. So I wouldn't say nay to that. I think I would need to have more information.
Thank you, Ms. Fields. And I believe the last time it was somewhere between $20,000 and $30,000 to do the evaluation. Does that sound?
I think it was that much.
It was just less than 20? 13, okay. I was thinking it was much more expensive.
And they do a great job as well.
Okay.
So, I mean, yeah, they do.
Interesting. I mean, we're happy to, Superintendent Hyde and I can explore who gets some proposals for facilitators, if that's the will of the board. Would you all prefer, I know this is the questions on the evaluation form are ones that we had come up with last year of using the form that he had used in his previous district and some of the things that we had asked specifically about based on our strategic plan. Are you wanting to redo the questions that are asked or just to have those one-on-one meetings like we did before? I guess what I'm saying is could we go ahead and fill out the evaluation and then bring in the third party at the next meeting if we have those proposals? Sorry.
It depends on how we're getting the data. That's where I have issues. I think the data that's being presented is being presented in a certain light, but not all the data is being presented. Just like at the last meeting, there was math, there was English, no science. Science is a major component in what we do. So I feel like if you're going to give a review during the end of a year, I think it needs to be a comprehensive review, areas we did do good on. If you remember, that's how we used to do it. Areas we didn't, but then we can say why, so that we're completely transparent, because there's goods, middles, not so good that we want to bring up. But I just feel like I want that comprehensive review, and I don't believe we're getting it.
So historically, we had done it in two parts,
Right.
at least the first time. So
Right.
this is not the part that is based on our scores and improvement, because we don't typically have all of that information until January.
That's fine.
So-
That's why I'm saying now, as we move forward, can we look into getting someone? And we've also done it, and it's kind of odd, the year we did, but we had somebody that worked for the district in our professional development department went through this process as well. Now that puts them in a little bit of a precarious role, right? So that, okay, but we have to save money that year. We did. Okay.
Okay. So I guess would the will of the board then be for us to go ahead, we can start looking into a third party to actually conduct the going through it with each of us and with him? Can we go ahead and fill out the evaluations? Because this is the more how you work with the superintendent, how.
Sure. I'm fine. Whatever the board decides.
If there's nothing academically on there, and there wouldn't be.
And I don't believe there is.
Yeah,
I can triple
then I
check.
don't know why we couldn't complete the form.
Okay.
Because we would know everything else, and we know everything academically too, but I think as Ms. Cunningham said, just having a little more information, when we get to that, and I know that the superintendent will provide that. And his staff.
And I know it took us a little while to get a date for strategic planning, but that's information that we'll go over at that, I think it's March 29th maybe, is the strategic planning meeting that we have scheduled on the calendar. So that's when that would be presented. Okay. So October 31st. Ms. Miller.
Can you just talk about what that third party, because I agree, what we're looking at on those forms isn't based on, I could see where a third party would be helpful in reviewing all the data with the academic data and all of the goals that we set. But the forms that you've provided are more interaction and communication pieces. And that's where I think that we should, in the past, that's where I thought that as professionals and people who have board experience, that I should be able to evaluate all of my staff without a third-party interventionist. Now, the third party, I think, is useful when we start breaking down the goals from our strategic plan and how that's working. So maybe I was confused on how we were using it. But to have a holistic feel about how I communicate, I don't want to spend $15,000 on that.
Yeah. So previously when we did it, in my recollection, please correct me if I'm wrong, but we each met individually with Dr. Frejo and he went through our evaluations that we had already completed and kind of got more feedback on those. Then he met with the superintendent and gave him all of that information in person, as opposed to just giving them the papers like we did last time that have all of that information.
Are board members not sitting with the current superintendent, attorney, and assistants and having conversation about a review? It's better to have a buffer of a third party and hoping that's being relayed, as that was an issue with the last person. To say something to someone who's going to relay it for me, that didn't work out so well. And so I don't know how comfortable I am with doing that again.
Madam Chair, I'm going to speak here.
Yes.
So you're going to need to talk to Wes, because there's contractual implications here as well. The board agreed to my evaluation process. It's part of my contract. You're reopening the contract. When the board agreed to do both a qualitative and a quantitative evaluation, the board deferred the quantitative, the student academic performance, until next school year, because this was the baseline year for the new statewide assessment. And so the board won't even have academic data in which to gauge or measure our progress and give me an evaluation based off that. And at the time, it was the board's interest to separate that from the qualitative because the board wanted to use that for performance pay, since I renewed my contract and refused a pay raise. Those were board members' comments, not my comments. And so I suggest that the board have a conversation with Mr. Bridges as to whether or not this reopens my contract, because you've already agreed to a performance evaluation system. During that time, we had a very honest conversation. If a board member wants to rate me low someplace, I expect there to have been a conversation about that. And I expect there to be a face-to-face conversation about that, not through a middleman who cannot convey the same feeling and sentiment, frustrations, and/or celebrations that you can each convey. The board takes issue that my position is the only one that you cannot evaluate effectively as individuals. I think that's a conversation for the board to have about how you want to proceed. But I do want to urge some caution because you are reopening my contract, I believe, for the evaluation process. And I'd be happy to go back to the comments that are all on record when we agreed as to how I would be evaluated. I'm evaluated again based off my operational side and the academic side. And at the time, the board was very clear when you adopted those academic metrics, because we went much deeper, if you recall, far deeper than you've ever gone before, as far as breaking it out by demographic subgroup, including IB, including ACE, including dual enrollment, including industry certifications, and all of those things. You'd never done that before in the evaluation. And so the interest of the board at the time was to use that for performance pay, which I'm very happy to have that conversation if you so choose. But this is the baseline year that we establish all those metrics. And so moving forward, if the board wants to bring in a third party, that's your decision. But I would have the conversation with Mr. Bridges to make sure that it's not in any way adversely impacting the contract that we currently have, because we had already reached an agreement about my evaluation instrument and the process we would use. Now it would be a significant deviation from that. So open to it, but it reopens my contract.
Thank you, Mr. Hyde, and I apologize. I did not mean to insinuate that this year was not the baseline year, because it is. That's just the timing of when
Yes, ma'am.
it normally comes was what my I intended my comments to be, so I apologize if I was not clear on that.
Can I have comments?
Yes, ma'am. Your mic's still.
Ms. Miller reference, was there not an opportunity for board members to have conversation with the superintendent all the time? And when we have had discussion in the past, the superintendent has basically said that if there's an issue, we need to make sure that we have had discussion before you rate me low on it, or whatever it is. And so I know that, I believe that we all have had that opportunity. Now, have we taken advantage of it? I don't know. I can only speak for myself. And I have taken advantage of that. And I well knew, Superintendent Hyde, that the academic piece was not a part of your evaluation. So please understand that. I understood that to be the case. I think at the end of the day, we really need to have conversation about the master board training. I think that's important. Just listening to some of the dynamics today, I think that we really need to see how we can get that on everybody's calendar, because I think it's important for us to be able to work together as a team, understanding we're not going to always be in agreement on how we're going to work through it. And at the end of the day, hopefully be a team. So I know I might be off the script, but I'm going to be off the script today because I think that master board training is very important. And I don't know when we last had it. It's been a minute. It's been a long time coming.
Thank you, Ms. Fields. Ms. Miller, did you have something?
Yeah, I just want to clarify that. I sit down with the superintendent, the attorney, the auditor, and our office staff and have conversations. I'm more comfortable giving a review that way, even if it's difficult to do with some information than sharing my thoughts and feelings with a third party who will go and help him understand my thoughts and feelings. I just don't, that doesn't work. That did not work well for me. I just don't think I don't know if maybe other boards do that. I think the one-on-one conversation to talk about the celebrations and the opportunities for growth need to happen one-on-one. In the past, that third party wasn't presented as someone who was doing that. I was trying to have those conversations myself. And so I agree that master board training would help. It has been a long time. I think it was my first year on the board when we attempted it. And so maybe that needs to be looked at again. I've just done enough evaluations of staff in my 20 years or so that I don't need a third party to help evaluate. So that was my concern. I like to have the face-to-face conversations because just like texting or email, anything that gets involved with between one-on-one communication can be interpreted multiple different ways, and I don't want that to happen.
Thank you, Ms. Miller. Ms. Cunningham?
I was going to change the subject. Is that okay? I don't have anything on this subject. I wanted to bring something up.
Do we
Or is
have
that not
any
yet?
other comments on evaluations?
Go ahead.
I concur with.
Hold on just a second. Yeah, John.
I concur with what Superintendent Hyde said, and that is, we need to look at this from a legal standpoint and make sure that we fully understand the contractual ramifications or potential contractual ramifications before we go down the path. And I think Mr. Bridges is probably, in a best position to assist. I will certainly assist where I can, but I think that's a good comment, and I think it's one that I would agree with.
Thank you. So we can put this on the agenda for the 24th to discuss with Mr. Bridges, and I'll get with him before then when he gets back. Do we want to wait to fill out his evaluations until after such time, or can we go ahead and get those started? Okay. So if we can have all evaluations in by the 31st, and then I'll get direction at the meeting on the 24th as to whether we want to look at a third party or keep it the way that we have been. I tend to agree with Ms. Miller that I would much rather call and yell at Superintendent Hyde or tell him how wonderful he is than have a third party, sorry, your mic wasn't on, Lisa, or have a third party convey those and probably not convey in the same sentiments that I would like to.
Can I ask one question?
Yes.
And so I saw earlier this year, Yvette sent both me and Mr. Nolte the instrument, so that way we could get familiar with it. And so my only question is, every person, as an educator myself, every person evaluates people differently, okay? It's, one person's standard, maybe a little different than another, even within the grading system. So my question is, Superintendent Hyde, I know you mentioned if anyone were to rate you low, then you want to have a conversation. And so I just need to know thresholds so I understand, like, comparatively, what is high, what is low, what is medium, just from that Likert scale. There's Likert scale questions, just so I know personally.
What we had agreed to when we met originally with the board to discuss my evaluation and that instrument was that no one can give me a rating of a 1 or a 2 without having met with me to discuss an issue.
So that's the definition.
So that way, an individual can't take a recent event and then say, well, I'm going to mark you low because I have hurt feelings about certain things.
Gotcha. Okay.
And that's the reality of it.
That helps me to understand just where low is versus, yeah.
Just as you would assume and expect that there are no gotchas when I evaluate staff or others.
Yes.
And that they're provided with timely and effective feedback. To rate someone a 1 or a 2 in that rating scale without having spoken to them explicitly about that issue is wrong.
Agreed. I just wanted to know because, again, everyone rates people differently. I just wanted to know where the standard was. That's all. I appreciate that.
And respectfully, if you're looking to give any of our staff that we're evaluating a 1 or a 2, if you'll have a conversation with them beforehand was the request as well.
Okay.
Well,
I'm not planning on it, but
for the evaluation is the point, not at the time of evaluation. You can't give someone a 1 or a 2 regardless. You should not professionally, respectfully, give someone a low rating unless you had previously met with them to address an issue, specifically within that area that you're evaluating them on. Because they had no opportunity to take that feedback and change the behavior or change the outcome. So essentially, you've turned it into a gotcha.
Gotcha. So that's why I just wanted to make sure where that line was. So let's say, if I rated someone a 3 or a 4, I didn't know what was considered low. So now at least I understand. Thank you.
Anything else on evaluations before I go back to Ms. Cunningham? All right, Ms. Cunningham.
Oh, that's okay. I don't have to go first. All right, so after our last work session, I was pretty bothered by the way in which it went regarding the new high school. At our last work session, staff was pretty much ready to move forward with the folks that that built the scenic terrace for us. And the night before, our work session was on September 26th. The night before was explained here at 10 p.m., they got another proposal. And so I made a comment that I feel that's disingenuous to the people that we've been working with the whole time. I apologize. I think, what's the name of the group? I'm sorry. What is it? I can't remember what the name.
Tomorrow's Schools?
Tomorrow's School, okay. So that group that built Scenic Terrace was on the forefront. They'd been working with staff, emails back and forth, everything was going forward with the intention it would be brought at that last work session, and then we would vote on it, obviously not today because it's another work session, but on the 24th of October. And, you know, the more I thought about it since that last meeting, and I know two of you were not here, I just feel that's very disrespectful to get something the night before, and then now all of a sudden we're going to entertain that group, and I don't know, it just rubbed me totally wrong. So I feel, and this is just me, once again, I would like to suggest that we bring the folks that built the Scenic Terrace to the board for a vote on October the 24th, because the way it was done, I don't feel was fair. And I've heard people in the community say, I wonder why. What happened the night before at 10 p.m. that we would have to look at that new site? Now, again, we don't know what the site is. We don't know who it is. I don't know the politics, because I'm sure there is behind it. To have brought something the next morning and all of a sudden they're a viable entity like the ones we've been working with for several months. You know, the project's been delayed on and on. So I just feel like in order to be fair, I mean, guys, we kind of have to be fair. If you've come before us, we've worked with you, we've answered questions, everything looked like it was going good, and then on the morning of the work session, it's like, no, now we're going to look at this other entity. And again, had they been brand new and never done a school for us in the timeline with the financial ramifications that were very good for us to build that school as quick as it, I would feel differently. I would be like, well, we really don't have a background. We really don't have it, but we do have that. We now have that with that group of folks. And the timeline's incredible, which is what we need for a new high school in my area. At least it's my area today. I don't know what it's going to look like, but for now it is. And that's very important. That area really needs a new high school and done as quick as possible. So I just wanted to bring it up. Again, I'm 1 out of 7, but I feel very strongly that we should go ahead and honor the fact that we've been working with them. But again, I know nothing about that second group of people, why all of a sudden everything was put on hold because of them. Again, the political stuff behind the scenes, I have no clue. But just to the average public, it doesn't look right. So that would be my thought, if we could ascertain putting it on the agenda for the 24th and then vote it up or down, and let's move forward with this project already. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Superintendent Hyde, did you want to respond to that?
I thought we did at the last meeting, but I'm happy to provide another summary. The board actually approved for us to engage with a traditional build and design architectural firm. You did. You voted on that. You approved that. That was the process we had in place. The original Baxter property that this group had proposed, that we had identified, was recently converted into single-family residential units. We were moving forward, gathering information from that group. And we've asked them to respond to several questions. In fact, they were responding to questions up until as recently as last week, still providing responses to our team so that we could, and at the last meeting I was very clear to say the expectation would be we would try and bring the item before the board in November so that you could vote on it in a timely manner between December and January. I was asked at that meeting, well, can we accelerate that timeline? And I said, if the team feels that they have all the information they need to make an informed recommendation to the board, certainly we'll do that. But I'm not going to rush the timeline. There are no politics at play here. There are advantages to both. We were made aware of a piece of property. The team went out and evaluated the property yesterday. I was not here, as you know. So I haven't had a conversation with the team as to whether or not that property would be sufficient for us. But you have to have that alternative in order to compare the traditional design and build with the other option, because their option is going to include a parcel of land. So you cannot make a good faith comparison without all the information. We are trying to act and ensure that we are being as transparent as possible. Let's be clear. I brought that proposal before the board. I helped nurture that project before the board and bring it to fruition. There is nothing that benefits any of us from not exploring all of our options. But our community deserves this to be a transparent process, and the assurances that we have truly looked at the actual costs for both proposals before I can feel confident making a recommendation to the board. The board will do with it what they see fit after the fact. But there's been nothing going on with this proposal since that time. I appreciate the fact that that group feels a sense of urgency. I disclosed why they have a sense of urgency at the last meeting. Because they don't own that property. They have an agreement, a hold on that property, and the longer the proposal goes, they have to renew the costs to hold that parcel of land. So if there's any politicking going on, it's outside of us. It's outside of the school district. Let's be clear. So I am more than happy to meet with staff and come to a determination. If we have all the information we need in order to give you a true and transparent apples-to-apples comparison. And let's not forget that the area that we're looking at, where their parcel of land is immediately adjacent or across the street from the original Baxter property, and the Hashtag community is going to have some concerns as well. And we're going to have to hear them out. So it's not as simple as just moving forward with the proposal. And you've received regular updates. That's the whole point behind me transparently bringing you an update at the last meeting, was to ensure that the public knew we are still moving forward with this. Here's the anticipated timeline in which we expect to bring the information to you. If we can bring it to you by the 24th, happy to do so. But it will be 2 full comparisons. And remember, as much as they had submitted an initial P3 proposal, they then submitted an amendment to their original proposal that the board received several months ago. And so without them answering and finalizing all the questions from the financial team, I'm not going to make a recommendation to the board. So there's been no intentional delay in this process. So we will get to it in a timely manner. We'll get to it when we have all the information, and our team can make a strong recommendation to the board, and we can answer all the questions that you may have at that time.
Thank you, Superintendent Hyde. Ms. Fields?
I personally reached out to the superintendent with a similar question about the timeline and about realistically, is this something that could be presented to the board at the October board meeting? And his response was pretty much what he just said. He wanted to make sure that it's done correctly and that we have all the information that's needed. And so I understand the urgency on the other end of the spectrum, but I also appreciate the superintendent wanting to make sure that all of our I's are dotted and our T's are crossed. So I am confident that when it's ready for consideration, he will bring it to us. And one of the things that I'm hearing in the community is that we need to make sure that we're not closing the door on our local contractors as well. So we have to be very mindful and make sure that whatever information the superintendent brings to us, that we look at it in a very objective manner and and I know that we will, make the best decision that we can for the good of our students and for the good of our school district.
Thank you, Ms. Fields. Ms. Miller?
I'm going to apologize. I'm freezing in here right this second. It's cold for whatever reason. We only have one meeting in November, so I'm hoping that once we get all the information no, I'm good, thanks. Once we get all the information, we're looking at that November 14th meeting, if possible, and not pushing it into the December, January meetings. November, I just want to remind that work session, we have one more work session, and then there's only one work session and board meeting in November, and I was hoping that we would have the information by then, if not October. I don't know if there's a timeline, if we see that. Because I think we've all had this conversation with the superintendent about the timeline. when you say November, December, I'm hoping I'm looking at that November 14th date if staff has had enough time by then. As I freeze, thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Miller. Mr. Sharpless, did you?
I was
Hold on a
just going to say
second.
the same thing that Board Member Miller said.
Okay.
And I did make the comment last time about asking about doing this as quickly as possible, but yet I understand there has to be due diligence. I'm just one of my concerns is, you know, this group, like you said, there is a financial ramification. I hope that the group would then be willing to pass that financial ramification down to us instead of completely just walking away from the project. Because I do feel like there's potential for cost savings for our district. You know, it's just a concern of mine if you know, the group decides to, hey, you know, we've taken long enough and we want to walk away from it. Now, that would be my biggest concern.
Thank you, Mr. Sharpless. Anything else on this topic? All right, any other updates, liaison reports? Ms. Fields.
Yes, I just wanted everyone to know that I had a chance to attend the first insurance committee meeting, and there's a lot of work that we're going to be doing, and I'm sure that the superintendent is being kept abreast of it. And we have a meeting coming up in a couple of weeks, and then we have meetings scheduled in November as well as in December. So we're trying to be able to work through this and hopefully have the work done by sometimes in the first of the year, if everything goes as it is anticipated.
Thank you, Ms. Fields, and thank you for serving on that committee. Ms.
And
Miller.
I also have I'm so excited about this next meeting that's coming up on Friday, the Polk County Value Adjustment Board. Jesus, keep me near the cross. I don't know why I agreed to do that.
I'm really excited that you decided that you wanted to be the point person and let me be the alternate for that one. So
But you need to be the point.
thank you. Ms. Miller.
In favor of Ms. Fields doing a lot of work on that. She's on some insurance committees and I sit on the other one, but they're meeting a lot more often, so maybe she does need relief from that Friday meeting. I want to talk a little bit about the insurance committee meetings, the ones that I attend. You know, I've made it a point that our vendors show up and stay for the entire meetings. We had our largest vendor had to leave early the last one, and they've been good about trying to do online meetings to help answer questions from both AFSCME and PEA. And I think this is important as we plan for the future and looking at all options available. You know, our insurance is one of our recruiting benefits, and I think everybody's working to do their best to make sure it's still leading in the Central Florida area and that we're providing all we can for our employees. I'm happy to say that our costs are trending downward. The last review, which is great because we had a couple of high years after COVID and other things. We are self-insured if the public doesn't know that. So when we have high cost years, it's very difficult for us. We saw those costs trending down, and we hope to continue that. And that's a lot of preventative things that our employees are doing. So I just want to say the work there is going and ongoing, and I appreciate Ms. Field sitting on those other committees because that is she's working on the long-term goals for our insurance. And I think that's one of the biggest things I hear from our staff, that, you know, if you can't, you know, if we're working on compression and we can't do the salaries as quickly as people are needed, be mindful of the insurance and what it means to families. So that was for my report. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Miller. Anyone else? All right, with that, I will hand it back over to Superintendent Hyde, and we can go to closed session.
Madam Chair, members of the board.
Sorry.
That's okay. Madam Chair, members of the board, there are no further items. We will clear the room and perform the closed door session in this room. We will just take a moment to verify that we have been taken offline as well.